The shuttle shook as it entered the atmosphere of Prime. Daniel Hayes gripped the armrest of his seat and looked out the small window. Below him, a world of black mountains and purple forests stretched to the horizon. It was beautiful in a strange and terrifying way. Daniel was not supposed to be here. He was just a lieutenant commander, a translator who worked in a small office on the diplomatic vessel Starward Dawn. He spoke 14 alien languages and could learn new ones in weeks instead of years. But he had never been part of anything important. He had never met an alien queen. He had never even left the ship during a diplomatic mission. Everything changed 3 days ago when Dr. the Head discovered something unusual about Daniel. During a routine medical scan, they found that his brain was different. Not damaged or sick, just different. The parts that controlled fear and psychic reception were smaller and less active than normal. He was naturally resistant to mental influence. This made him valuable. They were known throughout the galaxy for their psychic abilities. Their queen had ruled for over 800 years, and stories said that her voice could break minds. Other species brought special equipment to protect themselves when they visited her court. Humanity had no such technology. They had only been part of the Galactic Concord for 20 years, and they were still catching up. So they brought Daniel instead. Ambassador Lisa sat across from him, reviewing notes on her. She was a tall woman in her 60s with gray hair and sharp eyes. She had spent her entire career preparing for this moment. They were one of the most powerful species in the Concord, and an alliance with them could change everything for humanity. "Remember the protocols," she said without looking up. "Do not speak unless spoken to. Do not look directly at the Queen. Do not make sudden movements, and if something goes wrong, follow my lead." Daniel nodded. "Yes, Ambassador." Captain Torres sat near the door, his hand resting on the weapon at his hip. He was the security chief, a serious man who rarely smiled. He had argued against bringing Daniel on this mission. He thought it was too dangerous to rely on one untested officer, but Ambassador had overruled him. "The respect strength," Torres said. "They need to see that we are not afraid." Daniel almost laughed. He was very afraid, he just could not show it. The shuttle landed on a platform of black stone. Through the window, Daniel could see the palace rising before them. It was not built from normal materials. The walls were made of living crystal that pulsed with soft light. Towers reached toward the sky like the legs of some giant insect. The whole structure seemed to breathe. They stepped out into the cold air. A delegation was waiting for them. At the front stood a creature that Daniel recognized from his studies. It was one of the species that ruled this world. It stood nearly 3 meters tall on 6 legs, with a hard shell of deep green and eyes that reflected the light like mirrors. "I am a prime servant of Queen," the creature said. Its voice was strange, a mix of clicks and hums that Daniel's translator device converted into words. "You are welcome here, humans. The Queen has been waiting for you." Ambassador stepped forward and bowed slightly. "We are honored by this invitation. Earth sends its greetings and its hope for friendship between our peoples." Made a sound that might have been approval. "Follow me. The Queen does not like to wait." They walked through the palace gates and into a long hallway. The walls were lined with drones, soldiers who stood completely still like statues. Their eyes followed the humans as they passed. Daniel felt a pressure in his head, like someone was gently pushing against his thoughts. He ignored it and kept walking. Other alien ambassadors were already inside. Daniel recognized several species from his studies. They were tall and thin, with silver skin and no visible mouths. They were smaller, covered in scales, with 4 arms and quick, nervous movements. They glowed with soft bioluminescence, their bodies shifting through colors as they communicated with each other. All of them looked nervous. Daniel moved closer to Doctor, who was studying everything with wide eyes. "Have you noticed how scared everyone seems?" he whispered. She glanced at him and then looked away. "They are being respectful. They have strict protocols." It looks like more than respect to me." Doctor did not answer. She kept walking, her shoulders tense. They entered the throne room. It was enormous, a space so large that Daniel could not see the ceiling. Thousands of drones lined the walls, completely motionless. The air was thick with a strange smell, something sweet and old, like flowers that had been dead for centuries. At the center of the room sat the throne. It was made of the same black crystal as the palace, twisted into sharp angles that hurt to look at. And upon it sat Queen. Daniel had seen pictures of the Queen, but they did not prepare him for the reality. She was massive, larger than any he had ever seen. Her shell was not green but black, so dark that it seemed to absorb the light around her. Her eyes glowed with a cold intelligence that made Daniel feel like a small animal being watched by a predator. She did not move. She did not speak. She simply watched as the delegations arranged themselves before her. Ambassador stepped forward and began her speech. She spoke of peace and cooperation, of trade and mutual benefit. Her words were careful and practiced, designed to show respect without showing weakness. The Queen listened. Hours passed. She communicated only through asking questions about human technology, human society, human history. She seemed curious but distant, like a scientist studying insects under a glass. Daniel stood at the back of the human delegation, watching and waiting. The pressure in his head grew stronger. Something was coming. He could feel it. And then, without any warning at all, the Queen rose from her throne. The room went silent. Every creature, every drone, every ambassador froze in place. Daniel saw fear in the eyes of beings who had traveled across the galaxy. He saw the ambassador reach for something in his robes. He saw the take a step backward. A's voice cut through the silence. The Queen wishes to speak in her true voice. All who cannot endure should leave now. No one moved. No one dared to be the first to show weakness. Queen opened her mandibles and the world came apart. The sound that came from the Queen was not a sound at all. It was something deeper, something older. It did not enter through Daniel's ears. It went straight into his brain, past all his defenses, past everything he thought he knew about himself. It was like drowning in darkness. It was like falling into a hole with no bottom. It was every nightmare he had ever had, every fear he had ever felt, all happening at once and by 1,000. The Queen's voice carried 800 years of death. Daniel could feel the weight of it pressing down on him. He saw flashes of things that were not his memories. Planets burning, species screaming as they were destroyed, armies falling to their knees and begging for mercy that never came. This was the power of the Queen. This was why she had ruled for so long without challenge. Her voice said one thing over and over in a language that needed no translation. Submit. Bow, surrender. You are nothing. I am everything. There is no hope. There is no escape. Submit or be destroyed. Around Daniel, chaos erupted. The ambassador collapsed first. His tall body hit the floor with a loud crack, and he began to shake violently. Foam came from the place where his mouth should have been. His silver skin turned gray as his mind broke under the pressure. They did not even try to resist. All four of their ambassadors turned and ran for the doors, their scales rattling with terror. They pushed past each other, climbing over fallen bodies, desperate to escape the sound that followed them everywhere. They curled into balls on the floor. Their bioluminescent skin flickered wildly, cycling through every color as their bodies tried to process the overwhelming fear. Some of them made sounds like crying. Others went completely dark, their minds shutting down to protect themselves. The drones pressed themselves flat against the walls. Even they, creatures born to serve the Queen, could not stand before her true voice. They trembled and clicked their mandibles in submission. And the humans broke. Captain Torres stumbled backward, his hand reaching for his weapon but unable to close around it. His face was white with terror. His eyes were wide and empty, seeing things that were not there. He turned and ran, crashing into a pillar and falling, then getting up and running again. Doctor dropped to her knees. Tears streamed down her face and she was speaking in a small, broken voice. "Please," she whispered, "please, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. Please don't hurt me." She was not talking to the Queen. She was talking to ghosts from her past, memories that the Queen's voice had pulled out of the deepest parts of her mind. Ambassador, the woman who had trained her entire life for this moment, who had faced hostile aliens and political enemies without ever showing fear, turned and ran. Her careful dignity disappeared in an instant. She was just a scared animal now, desperate to get away from the predator. Everyone ran, everyone fell, everyone broke. Everyone except Daniel. He stood in the center of the throne room alone. The Queen's voice washed over him in waves, each one stronger than the last. He felt the fear. He felt the despair. He felt the overwhelming urge to submit, to kneel, to give up everything he was and beg for mercy. But he did not move. His legs shook. His hands trembled. Sweat ran down his face and dripped onto the floor. His heart beat so fast that it felt like it might explode. Every part of his body wanted to run, to hide, to escape this terrible sound that was trying to tear his mind apart. But somewhere deep inside him, something else stirred. Something stubborn. Something that had been passed down through countless generations of humans who had faced impossible odds and refused to give up. Daniel thought of his grandmother. She had been a refugee when she was 7 years old. She had watched her parents die in front of her. She had walked 300 miles through dangerous territory with no food, no water, and no hope. People had told her to give up. People had told her she would never survive. But she kept walking. She kept going. She refused to die. If she could do that, Daniel could stand still. He thought of all the stories he had heard growing up. Stories of people who had survived wars and famines and plagues. Stories of people who had been beaten down again and again but always got back up. Stories of people who looked into the face of death and said, "Not today." The Queen's voice screamed at him to submit. It showed him visions of his own death, slow and painful. It promised him suffering beyond imagination. It tried to convince him that resistance was pointless, that he was a small and weak creature facing a god. Daniel gritted his teeth and stayed on his feet. The Queen stopped. The silence that followed was so sudden and so complete that it hurt. Daniel's ears rang. His head throbbed with pain. He could barely see through the spots dancing in front of his eyes. But he was still standing. Queen looked at him, really looked at him for the first time. Her massive body shifted on the throne, and her glowing eyes focused on this small human who had done something impossible. The prime servant stared at Daniel with something like shock. "You should be mad," he said, his voice trembling. "Your mind should be ash. No creature has ever remained standing after the Queen speaks her true voice, not in 800 years. Daniel opened his mouth to respond, but at first no words came out. His throat was dry. His tongue felt like it was made of sand. He swallowed hard and tried again. "I heard you," he said to the Queen. His voice was rough and weak, but it was steady. "I heard everything you meant, the threats, the power, the centuries of death." He paused and took a breath. "But I've heard worse." The Queen made a sound that Daniel could not interpret. Through her prime servant, she asked a question that echoed through the empty throne room. "What could possibly be worse than my utterance? I have broken the minds of species older than your son. I have ended civilizations with my voice alone. What could a creature as young and small as you have experienced that prepared you for this?" Daniel looked at the ancient Queen, at the thousands of drones lining the walls, at the broken bodies of ambassadors who had fled in terror. He thought about how to explain something that most aliens would never understand. "Do you know the history of my species?" he asked. The Queen's eyes flickered. Through she said, "I know that you are young. I know that you have only recently reached the stars. I know that you are weak compared to most species in the conquered." Daniel nodded. All of that is true, but there is something else you should know about humans. He took a step forward, and for the first time in 800 years, the Queen of the leaned back ever so slightly. We have spent our entire existence trying to survive on a world that wanted us dead, and we did not just survive. We conquered that world. We conquered ourselves. We looked into the darkest parts of our own nature, and we kept going anyway. The Queen was silent, waiting. Daniel continued, "Your voice is powerful, your voice is old, but the darkness you carry is not new to us. We have lived with our own darkness for thousands of years. We have faced despair so deep that your utterance feels almost familiar." He met the Queen's glowing eyes, breaking every protocol, ignoring every rule. You cannot break what has already been broken and put back together 1,000 times. The throne room was silent. The other ambassadors had fled or collapsed. The drones remained pressed against the walls, still trembling from their queen's utterance. Only Daniel and the Queen faced each other in the vast empty space. Queen studied him with those ancient glowing eyes, through her prime servant as she spoke again. "Explain. Tell me of this darkness you carry. Show me what could prepare a creature like you for my voice." Daniel took a moment to gather his thoughts. How could he explain human history to an alien queen who had never known what it meant to struggle? How could he describe the weight that every human carried inside them? He began with the simple things. "On our world, we did not start as the dominant species," he said. "We were prey, small, weak, slow. Other animals hunted us for food. We had no claws, no fangs, no armor. We survived because we could think, because we could work together, and because we refused to give up even when everything told us we should." A translated his words for the Queen, though Daniel suspected she understood him perfectly well on her own. "But the other animals were not our biggest threat," Daniel continued. "The planet itself tried to kill us. Ice ages covered the land in frozen death. Droughts turned fertile ground into dust. Earthquakes and floods and fires destroyed everything we built. Disease swept through our populations and killed millions. We were never safe. We were never comfortable. Every generation faced something that should have ended us." The Queen made a low humming sound. "And yet you survived." "We did more than survive. We adapted. We learned. We remembered the lessons of every disaster and passed them down to our children. Every human alive today carries the memory of all that suffering in their blood. It made us who we are." Daniel paused. This was the hard part, the part that most humans did not like to talk about, especially to aliens. But the planet was not the worst thing we faced. The worst thing was ourselves. Queen leaned forward slightly. Her interest was clear. "Humans are capable of great kindness," Daniel said. "We can love and create and sacrifice ourselves for strangers, but we are also capable of terrible cruelty. We have spent most of our history hurting each other. Wars that killed millions, slavery that lasted for centuries, genocide, torture, the complete destruction of entire cultures." He thought of the history books he had read as a child, the images that still haunted his dreams sometimes. "We built weapons that could destroy cities in a single flash of light. We used them. We killed hundreds of thousands of people in seconds, and then we built more weapons, bigger and more terrible than before. For decades, we lived under the shadow of total destruction. Any day, any moment, someone could have pushed a button and ended our entire species." A's translation faltered for a moment. The prime servant seemed disturbed by what he was hearing. "Your own kind did this to each other." "Yes, and that was not the worst of it." Daniel took a breath and continued. "We poisoned our own planet. We knew we were doing it and we kept doing it anyway. We burned so much fuel that the air itself turned against us. The seas rose. The weather became violent. Whole regions became unlivable. Millions of people had to flee their homes. Many did not make it." He gestured at nothing in particular. "For a long time, we thought we would destroy ourselves. Many of us expected it. We made stories about the end of the world because it seemed so close, so inevitable. We grew up knowing that our parents' generation might be the last, that we might be the last. The queen was completely still now. She did not move or make any sound. Her eyes remained fixed on Daniel. "We survived anyway," he said. "We found ways to clean the air and heal the land. We stopped making war on each other mostly. We learned to work together at least enough to reach the stars, but we never forgot what we went through. We never forgot what we are capable of." Daniel pointed to his own chest. Every human carries that knowledge inside them. We know that the universe is dangerous. We know that death can come at any time from any direction. We know that even the people we love can turn into monsters. We have seen the worst that existence has to offer, and we are still here. He lowered his hand and met the queen's gaze once more. "Your voice showed me despair. It showed me death and destruction and the weight of centuries. But I have studied my own history. I know what my ancestors lived through. Compared to that, your voice was just a reminder of things I already knew." For a long moment, no one spoke. The throne room seemed to hold its breath. Then Queen did something that I had never seen in all his years of service. She made a sound that was almost like laughter. "You are an interesting creature, human," she said through her prime servant. "Most species that come before me speak of their achievements. They boast of their technology, their culture, their power. They try to impress me with how far they have risen. You are the first to tell me how far you have fallen." Daniel nodded. "We are not proud of our history, but we are proud that we survived it. And you believe that this suffering, this long struggle against yourselves and your world, is what allowed you to stand against my utterance." "I do not just believe it, I know it. Every human is born with a piece of that struggle inside them. We call it different things: resilience, stubbornness, the refusal to give up. It is not something we learn, it is something we are." The queen considered this for a moment. Then she rose from her throne again, but this time she did not speak in her true voice. She simply stood, towering over Daniel, and looked down at him with something that might have been respect. "In 800 years, I have tested every species that sought alliance with she said. The who claim to be masters of logic broke in seconds. The who boast of their warrior culture ran like frightened children. The who believe their emotions make them strong curled up and wept." She took a step toward Daniel, and he forced himself not to back away. "Every species has failed. Every species has proven themselves unworthy of true partnership. They may they may trade with us and follow our laws, but they are not our equals. They never can be." A step forward. "My queen, surely you do not mean to suggest—" "Silence," the queen said, and the prime servant immediately fell quiet. "I will speak for myself now." And she did, not in her true voice but in a normal voice, a voice that Daniel could hear with his ears and understand without pain. It was deep and ancient, like stones grinding together in the depths of a cave. "Human," she said, "you have done something impossible today. You have earned the right to hear what I am about to say." Daniel swallowed hard but did not look away. "I am listening. I am going to offer your species something I have never offered any other, an alliance of true equals, a partnership between thee and humanity, not because you are stronger than us or smarter than us or more advanced than us. You are none of these things." She leaned closer, and Daniel could smell the ancient, sweet scent of her breath. "I offer this because you have shown me something I had forgotten, something I have not seen in 800 years of ruling, the capacity to endure, the will to stand when all others fall, the stubborn refusal to break." She pulled back and returned to her throne. "This is what I have been searching for, a species worthy of standing beside not beneath us, and I have finally found it in the most unlikely of places." The doors of the throne room opened slowly. I had sent drones to find the humans who had fled, and now they were being led back inside. They walked with their heads down, their faces red with shame. Ambassador came first. Her normally perfect hair was messy and tangled. Her diplomatic uniform was torn at the shoulder where she had fallen. She could not meet Daniel's eyes as she approached. Behind her came Captain Torres, still pale and shaken. Doctor walked with the help of a drone, her legs too weak to support her on their own. The other members of the human delegation followed, all of them broken in their own ways. They gathered in front of the throne, unsure of what to say or do. They had failed. They had run. In the most important moment of human diplomatic history, they had abandoned their post and left one of their own to face the Queen alone. Ambassador finally looked up at Daniel. "Lieutenant Commander Hayes," she said, her voice rough. We. She could not finish the sentence. Daniel shook his head. "You don't need to apologize, Ambassador. What happened was not your fault. The Queen's voice affects everyone differently." "But you stayed," Captain Torres said. There was something new in his eyes when he looked at Daniel, something like awe. "You stood there while the rest of us ran like cowards." "I am not braver than any of you," Daniel said. I don't know, I couldn't make my legs move." This was not entirely true, but Daniel did not want to make his colleagues feel worse than they already did. Queen spoke and everyone fell silent, through as she addressed the gathered humans. "Your species has surprised me today. I have ruled for 800 years, and in that time I have tested every species that sought our alliance. All have failed. Your ambassador failed. Your soldiers failed. Your scholars failed." Ambassador lowered her head even further. "But one of you did not fail," the Queen continued. "One of you stood against my utterance and refused to break, and in doing so, he has proven something important about your species." She gestured with one of her many limbs, pointing at Daniel. "This one told me of your history. He told me of the suffering and struggle that forged your kind. He showed me that humans carry a weight inside them that other species cannot imagine, a weight of pain and survival and endless fighting against impossible odds." The Queen leaned forward on her throne. "I have decided to offer humanity an alliance of equals, not because you are powerful, not because you are advanced, but because you have proven that you can endure, and endurance is the most valuable quality in the universe." Ambassador's head snapped up. "An alliance of equals, but we failed your test, we ran." "Most of you ran," the Queen corrected. "But one of you stood. One of you is enough. It shows what your species is capable of, even if not all of you have realized it yet." The other alien ambassadors had started to return as well, creeping back into the throne room with fearful looks. The ambassador was being carried by his aides, his body still twitching from the mental damage he had suffered. They huddled together in a group, not meeting anyone's eyes. They glowed with shame, their colors muted and gray. They all stared at Daniel with a mixture of disbelief and envy. For centuries, they had tried to earn the Queen's favor. They had brought gifts and technologies and promises of servitude. And now this young species, these weak and primitive humans, had achieved what none of them could. Approached Daniel with something in his claws. It was a small badge made of the same black crystal as the palace, carved into the shape of a six-pointed star. "The Queen grants you this token," he said. "It marks you as a friend of with all the rights and privileges that title brings. You may travel freely in our space. You may call upon our forces in times of need. You may speak directly to the Queen whenever you wish." Daniel took the badge carefully. It was warm in his hands, almost alive. "I don't know what to say." "Say nothing," Queen replied through her servant. "Words are cheap. What matters is what you do next. Take this alliance back to your people. Make them understand what it means. And remember what I told you. Endurance is the most valuable quality in the universe. Never lose it." Ambassador stepped forward, her diplomatic instincts finally overcoming her shame. "Your Majesty, thank you. On behalf of Earth and all humanity, I accept your offer of alliance. We will honor this partnership and prove ourselves worthy of your trust." The queen made a dismissive gesture. "You will prove nothing to me, ambassador. I have already seen what I needed to see. What you must do now is prove yourselves to the rest of the galaxy. Show them what humans are made of. Show them why I chose to stand beside you instead of above you." She settled back on her throne. "Now go. I have much to think about and you have much to do." The audience was over. The human delegation bowed and began to retreat, but Daniel hesitated. There was something he needed to say. "Your Majesty," he called out, "may I ask one question?" The queen tilted her massive head. "Speak." "Why do you use the utterance as a test? You must know that it causes pain. You must know that it breaks people. Why not find another way to measure strength?" For a long moment the queen was silent. Then she made that sound again, the one that was almost like laughter. "Because true strength cannot be measured in comfort," she said. "Anyone can stand tall when the sun is shining. Anyone can be brave when there is no danger. True strength only reveals itself in moments of absolute crisis. The utterance creates such a moment. It strips away all pretense, all training, all preparation. It shows who a person truly is." She paused. "Most species are weaker than they believe. They have built their civilizations on foundations of peace and plenty, and they have forgotten what it means to struggle. When they face my voice, they discover that their strength was an illusion." Her eyes fixed on Daniel. "But you did not discover an illusion. You discovered truth. The suffering of your ancestors lives inside you, human. It is your burden, but it is also your gift. Never forget that." Daniel nodded slowly. "I won't forget." "See that you don't." The queen closed her eyes. Escort our guests to their ship, and make sure the other ambassadors understand what happened here today. I want the entire Concord to know that humanity has earned my respect." A bowed deeply. "Yes, my queen." As Daniel walked out of the throne room, he could feel the eyes of every alien on him. Even the drones. They all looked at him like he was something new, something they had never seen before. And in a way, he was. He was proof that humanity was not just another young species struggling to find its place in the galaxy. He was proof that they were something more. Something that could endure. 30 years had passed since that day in the throne room. 30 years since Daniel Hayes had stood alone against the voice of a queen and changed the course of human history. Daniel was an old man now. His hair had turned gray and his face was lined with the marks of time, but his eyes were still sharp and his back was still straight. He refused to let age bend him, just as he had refused to let the queen break him all those years ago. He sat on the balcony of his home on Earth, looking out at the evening sky. Ships moved among the stars, visible as tiny points of light against the darkness. Human ships, ships from a dozen other species that had joined the Alliance over the decades. The world had changed so much since his return from Prime. The alliance with the Queen had opened doors that humanity had not even known existed. Trade routes that brought wealth and technology. Military partnerships that kept Earth safe from hostile species. Cultural exchanges that expanded human knowledge in ways no one had imagined. And Daniel had been at the center of it all. He had spent the first 10 years after the audience serving as humanity's primary ambassador to the. He had traveled to their worlds, learned their customs, and built relationships that would last for generations. The Queen had summoned him for private conversations many times, asking about human history and philosophy, trying to understand the species that had surprised her so deeply. After that, he had returned to Earth to train the next generation of diplomats. He taught them about thee and the other species of the conquered. He taught them about patience and respect and the importance of understanding alien cultures. But most importantly, he taught them about themselves. Never forget where you came from, he would tell his students. Never forget what your ancestors survived. That history is not a burden, it is a gift. It is the reason we are still here. Many of them did not understand at first. They had grown up in a time of peace and plenty, when the struggles of the past seemed like distant stories. But Daniel always found ways to make them see. He would tell them about the ice ages, when small groups of humans huddled around fires and fought to stay alive. He would tell them about the plagues that killed millions and the wars that nearly destroyed civilization. He would tell them about the climate crisis that pushed humanity to the edge of extinction and the incredible effort it took to pull back from that edge. And he would tell them about his grandmother. Always, he would tell them about his grandmother. She was 7 years old when she became a refugee, he would say. Her parents were killed in front of her. She walked 300 miles through dangerous territory with no food, no water, and no hope. People told her to give up. People told her she would never survive. But she kept walking. She kept going. She refused to die. He would pause and look at his students with those sharp old eyes. That is what it means to be human. That is what we carry inside us. The ability to face impossible odds and keep going anyway. The stubborn refusal to break. The will to endure. Some of his students went on to become great diplomats. Others became soldiers or scientists or artists. But all of them carried his lessons with them. All of them remembered what he taught. A knock at the door interrupted Daniel's thoughts. He turned to see a young standing in the entrance to his balcony. She was small for her species, barely 2 meters tall, with a shell of deep blue instead of the usual green. "Ambassador Hayes," she said in careful English, "I hope I am not disturbing you." Daniel smiled and gestured for her to join him. "Not at all, please sit down." The young moved to the balcony railing and looked out at the night sky. She was a student from sent to Earth as part of an exchange program. Daniel had been her mentor for the past year. "I have been thinking about what you told me," she said. "About what happened in the throne room all those years ago. About why you were able to stand against my grandmother's voice." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Your grandmother?" Made a sound that might have been embarrassment. "Yes, Queen is my grandmother. I did not tell you before because I wanted you to treat me like any other student." "I see," Daniel nodded slowly. "And have you figured out the answer to your question?" "I think so." A turn to face him. "My grandmother's voice carries the weight of 800 years. It contains all the death and destruction she has witnessed. It is heavy enough to crush the minds of most creatures." "That is true. But humans carry their own weight. A weight of suffering and survival that goes back thousands of years. When my grandmother's voice met your weight, they canceled each other out. You were able to stand because you were already carrying something just as heavy." Daniel considered this for a moment. "That is a good way to think about it, but I would add one thing." "What is that?" "Your grandmother's weight is her own. She carries it alone. But the weight that humans carry is shared. Every human who has ever lived has added to it and drawn from it. We are connected to our ancestors in ways that most species cannot understand. Their strength is our strength. Their endurance is our endurance." He reached into his pocket and pulled out the black crystal badge that the Queen had given him 30 years ago. It still felt warm in his hand, still seemed almost alive. "I did not stand alone in that throne room," he said. "I had all of humanity standing with me. Every person who has ever suffered and survived. Every person who has ever faced despair and refused to break. They were all there inside me, giving me the strength to stay on my feet." I looked at the badge with reverence. "I have never seen one of those in person. My grandmother has only given a handful of them in her entire reign." "I know." Daniel held it up so she could see the light reflecting off its surface. "She told me that endurance is the most valuable quality in the universe. I have spent 30 years trying to understand what she meant." "And do you understand now?" Daniel smiled again, but this time there was something sad in it. "I think I do. The universe is hard. It throws challenges at us that seem impossible to overcome. Most species break eventually. They give up, or they destroy themselves, or they fade away into nothing. But the ones that endure, the ones that keep going no matter what, they are the ones that shape history. He put the badge back in his pocket and looked out at the stars. Humanity has a long road ahead of us. We have made mistakes, and we will make more. We will face disasters and crises and enemies that want to destroy us. But as long as we remember what we are, as long as we remember the weight we carry and the strength it gives us, we will endure. O was silent for a moment. Then she asked the question that she had been wanting to ask since they first met. Ambassador Hayes, what were you thinking in that moment? When my grandmother spoke and the universe seemed to demand your surrender, what was going through your mind? Daniel laughed, a warm sound that filled the night air. It was the same question he had been asked 1,000 times over the years, and he always gave the same answer. I was thinking about my grandmother, he said. She survived a refugee camp when she was 7 years old, watched her parents die, walked 300 miles to safety with nothing but the clothes on her back. If she could do that, I could stand still for a few seconds. A tilted her head. I do not understand. How does thinking of one old woman help you face the voice of a queen? Daniel reached out and placed a hand on her shoulder. That is exactly what I have been trying to explain. She was not just one old woman. She was all of us. Every human who has ever lived and died and refused to give up. She was the symbol of everything we are and everything we can be. He squeezed her shoulder gently. Some things are only for humans to know, but I hope that someday you will understand. I hope that someday all species will understand. I looked at the old man, and for a moment she could see what her grandmother had seen 30 years ago. Not a weak, fragile creature, not a young and primitive species. Something more. Something that carried the weight of ages and refused to be crushed by it. Something that would endure.